Need to share something real quick with you. As we close out this series we've been navigating together, learning how to launch. 1 Samuel chapter 10. I want to read verse number 1, and then we're going to jump down to verse number 20. 1 Samuel chapter 10. Verse number 1 says, "Then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it over Saul's head. And he kissed Saul and said, 'I'm doing this because the Lord has appointed you to be the ruler over Israel, his possession.'" Verse 20 says, "So Samuel brought all the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Benjamin was chosen by lot. And then he brought each family of the tribe of Benjamin before the Lord, and the family of the Matrites was chosen. And finally, Saul, son of Kish, was chosen from among them. But when they looked for him, he had disappeared. So they asked the Lord, 'Where is he?' And the Lord replied, 'He's hiding among the baggage.' So they found him and brought him out, and he stood head and shoulders above anyone else. And then Samuel said to all the people, 'This is the man the Lord has chosen as your king. No one in all Israel is like him.' And all the people shouted, 'Long live the king.'" That's enough. Be seated in the presence of the Lord. Family, I'm not sure if you've ever spent much time in this particular passage. This is one that I happen to think about often. It's the story of the calling and the coronation of Saul, first king of Israel. It's a fascinating story for several reasons, but it's also a hugely historical and significant moment in the history of Israel. Because up until that moment, Israel had never had a king. They never had a king. They left Egypt and entered the promised land under Moses. They fought for conquests under Joshua, and for generations they existed as a loose confederation of 12 tribes, 12 independent tribes, 12 tribes of Israel. Instead of a central government, they were led by judges, leaders like Samson and Deborah and Gideon, Othniel, Ehud. You recognize those names. These are people from whom God raised up in specific seasons and for specific reasons to guide his people through moments of great challenge and turmoil. We read about these stories all throughout the book of Judges. And for generations, nearly 400 years, from the time of Joshua to this moment, Israel prospered. They had highs and lows, but they prospered without a centralized government, without a standing national army, without an economic infrastructure to unite them. They thrived. But how many know that seasons change and times change, moments shift, and old chapters end and new ones begin? And this is where we find Israel in the book of 1 Samuel. The landscape had changed. And it was time for Israel to rise to the moment within which it found itself. They had to evolve from this loose confederation or collection of tribes into a unified kingdom. And if they were going to be a kingdom, they would need a king. Now the truth is, they didn't need a physical king. God was already their king. They didn't need a physical king, but God perceived that it was the people who struggled to see themselves as a nation without someone sitting on the throne like a king, as all their neighbors had. So God, he went to his prophet Samuel one day, 1 Samuel 9:19. He went to Samuel, he said, "I've chosen a man. I see the need going on in Israel, and I've chosen a man who's going to help Israel step into this new chapter. I've chosen a man who I'm going to use to help them launch into this new season I've ordained for them. And Samuel, I want you to go down to the territory of Benjamin, and I'm going to tell you where to find this guy. His name's Saul. He's Kish's boy. I want you to seek him out, and I want you to anoint him the first king of Israel." And so by the time we reach 1 Samuel 10, Samuel had an initial encounter with Saul. He'd given Saul a word concerning what was about to happen, and he'd sent him some confirmation of the fact that God was going to be with him. And then Samuel calls for all the leaders from all the tribes to come together at Mizpah. for a ceremony. It was their custom whenever there was a moment, a big decision to be made, the people would come together and they'd cast lots to confirm the direction of the Lord. So that's what they were doing. Samuel, he brought everyone together, all the leaders of the tribal factions. They arrived at Mizpah. They left their bags and their luggage right there at the horses, and they entered the temple to cast their lots. And they drew lots, and the lot fell on Benjamin, Saul's tribe. Then another lot was drawn, and it fell on Matri, Saul's clan. And then on Kish, Saul's immediate family. And finally, it literally fell on Saul. But verse 21 says, when they looked for Saul, he was nowhere to be found. And then they inquired of the Lord. They said, Lord, has Saul even arrived yet? Where is he? And the Lord said, yes, he's here, but he's hidden himself among the baggage. Get that picture. After all of that, after God had called him, after Samuel had anointed him, after the people confirmed him, it was time. That's what Pastor BJ talked about last week. It was time. It was the moment. It was time for Saul to launch himself and his people into this new season that God had ordained for him. But when they looked for him, Saul was hiding behind baggage. For just a few minutes this morning, family, I need to talk about living beyond baggage. We got to learn how to live beyond baggage. We can't hide behind baggage when God has called us to be a king. We got to learn how to live. Somebody hear me. We got to learn how to live beyond the baggage. Some of y'all know I was on the West Coast. That's why I wasn't here last week. I was on a work trip on the West Coast. I appreciate Pastor Brandon, everybody going forward without me. I used to travel a fair amount for work. Yes, sir. Not so much anymore, praise the Lord. But I remember when I was traveling more often than not, the one thing that I hardly ever did was check my bags. Hardly ever. Hardly ever. I hardly ever check my bags. Too many bad experiences, bags lost or bags damaged or bags showing up the day after I got there. I just decided if I'm on travel, I'm going to make sure I do what I need to do. I'm going to pack my bags in such a way that I can keep control of my stuff at all times. It was really a control thing for me, honestly. I wanted to feel in control of my own stuff. I wanted to be in control of my own bags. I didn't want to have to trust anybody else to handle them right. I didn't want to have to worry about them getting lost or misplaced. I didn't want to risk something being taken out of him, and I wasn't ready to let go of, or something being exposed that I didn't want anybody to see. So I kept my baggage close so I could stay in control of it. But this last trip, I was in San Diego. I was riding to the shuttle to the airport, and when I was running a little late. When we got there, the bus happened to stop right in front of the curbside baggage drop-off. Something hit me, said, well, just check your bags. And I never do that. I never check my bags. But for whatever reason, this time I went ahead and I did it. And family, I have to tell you, I'd forgotten how nice it is to walk through the airport without baggage. I completely was sleeping on this. I had forgotten what it was like to move freely. I had forgotten what it was like to not have to struggle to find space for me and my baggage on the escalator. I'd forgotten what it felt like to not have to maneuver around my baggage in tight spaces, to not have to worry about what parts of my baggage might be scrutinized or analyzed in the security line. Everybody's staring at it. I'd forgotten what it looks like to live beyond my baggage. And family, I guess all I'm asking you this morning, I'm going to sit down in just a minute, but all I'm asking you is, when's the last time you checked your bags? If we're going to launch some stuff, when's the last time you checked your bags? When's the last time you made a decision to lighten your load and reduce your burden? When's the last time you trusted somebody other than yourself to watch your stuff so you could maneuver free and unencumbered? Because I feel like God might be trying to drop us a hint this morning as we close this teaching series out. If you've been along for the ride this month, we've been teaching this series called Learning How to Launch. And remember, to launch is to set things in motion. It's to introduce things into existence. It's to propel things forward with force and momentum. And it happens when we give God permission. It happens when we give God access and willingness to use our lives as ground zero to unleash the amazing into the earth. The God of the universe is in the business of using flawed and imperfect people to set good things in motion. You and me. He's in the business of using flawed and imperfect people to breathe wonderful things into existence and to propel awesome things forward with force and momentum when we let him. But understand, if you expect to launch anything good out of your life, if you expect to launch anything of worth, anything of significance, anything of virtue or value, understand that you're going to have to fight. You're going to have a fight on your hands, and that fight is going to be with an enemy who way too often lives rent-free in your mind, and its name is baggage. Baggage isn't just something you carry in your hands at the airport. Baggage is something you carry in your heart for your entire life if you're not careful. Baggage is fear that tells you you're not ready. It's insecurity that tells you you're not worthy. It's disobedience that keeps you out of alignment with God's will. It's comparison that makes you think you don't measure up. It's anxiety that keeps you trapped in what ifs and what nows. It's regret that holds you hostage to what happened yesterday. And listen, baggage will block your ability to launch the light that's inside of you every time if it's afforded the opportunity. Baggage would have told Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to stay silent. Baggage would have told him that he was too young, too unqualified, too vulnerable to dare speak of a dream that was so far-fetched. Baggage, it would have told him that there was too much risk of violence and the threats on his life were too great. But he didn't listen to his baggage. Instead, he led a movement that changed the world. Baggage would have told Maya Angelou to let her past define her, to let her trauma, the abuse she experienced as a little girl, to keep her from speaking. It would have told her that a black woman with her past had no place writing words that would inspire generations, but she didn't listen to her baggage, and she shaped a culture with her poetry and her wisdom. Baggage would have told Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson that they didn't belong at NASA. It would have told them that the baggage would have told them that black women had no place doing the calculations that would send men into space. It would have told them that their talents didn't matter because the world didn't see their worth. But instead of listening to doubt and listening to their baggage, they used their God-given brilliance to launch rockets into the sky. Baggage would have told Shirley Chisholm. Can y'all let me just talk for a minute? Baggage would have told Shirley Chisholm to give up on becoming the first black woman elected to Congress. It would have told her that the system was too stacked against her, that her voice would be ignored. But instead of letting those barriers stop her, she shattered them. And she would eventually become a seven-time U.S. House of Representative member. She would become the first black woman elected to Congress in 1968 and the first black candidate to seek a major party's nomination for the President of the United States. Don't listen to your baggage. Baggage would have told Barack Obama that a black man with an unusual name raised by a single mother could never become the President of the United States. It would have told him that America wasn't ready, that the opposition was too fierce, that his efforts would be in vain, that he didn't have enough money, that he didn't have the connection. Baggage would have told him to go have his seat, but he said he had an audacity of hope. Family, we are people who know how to live beyond baggage. I'm not scared of baggage. I'm not worried about baggage. I'm not going to let baggage control me. I'm not going to let baggage label me. I'm not going to let baggage define me. I'm going to live beyond my baggage. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean baggage isn't going to happen. It doesn't mean that life is not going to happen. But it means that when it happens, we learn how to live beyond what other people get bound by. We learn how to live beyond what other people get trapped by. Family, in this season where God has so much for us to launch, this is an incredibly urgent message. And unfortunately, the life of King Saul offers a pretty clear case study as to exactly how urgent it is. Because in Saul's story, we find a cautionary tale of a man who could never quite figure out how to live beyond his baggage. A man who was called to be a king, but he was trapped by his baggage. On the outside, Saul looked like every king, every example of a king. He was tall and he was strong. He was from a wealthy, well-connected family. He moved like a king. He thought like a king. Even before Samuel found him, Saul was already leading like a king. The scripture tells us that he was leading a crew of men on a mission to recover his father's lost donkeys when God arranged a divine appointment with the prophet Samuel. See, Saul, he had all the makings one might consider necessary for a person to be seen as a king. The barrier that ultimately ended up standing in his way was his baggage. See, Saul had a problem with insecurity. He was woefully insecure. See, insecurity is one of the saddest versions of baggage. It's when everyone can see you but you. Insecurity. It's when everyone sees your power, everyone sees your potential, everyone sees your purpose, but you can't see it. It's insecurity. Insecurity can sometimes be a little tricky to spot because sometimes we spiritualize insecurity and we mislabel and we call it humility. They're not the same. They're not the same. They're not the same. Insecurity and humility are not the same. Insecurity comes from a place of self-doubt. It's rooted in fear and a lack of confidence. Actually, sometimes insecurity is really just pride showing up in reverse. Insecurity tells you that you can't do a thing, and your brain tells you that you should be able to do it on your own. That's pride showing up in reverse. Insecurity, it comes from a place of self-doubt, but humility is different. Humility is rooted, yes, in a realistic understanding of one's strengths and weaknesses, but it's balanced with a deep trust in God's grace and God's purpose and God's ability to make up the difference. Humility isn't about self-doubt. It's rooted in an understanding that we are nothing without God anyway, and that He is the source of our power. So we don't have to be insecure about going to Him. We were designed to have to go to Him. We just need to be humble enough to do it. See, insecurity is self-focused. Humility is God-focused. Insecurity is based on fear of our failure and our being judged for it. Humility is based on confidence in God's ability and His grace and His sufficiency. Insecurity causes us to run from Jesus, and humility causes us to run to Jesus. That's why David said in Psalm 34:4, he said, I sought the Lord. I tried it on my own. But I sought the Lord, and He answered me. And when He answered me, He delivered me from all of my fears. That's why Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12:9, he said, he was speaking of God, and Paul said, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. That my power is made perfect where? In your weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Humility drives us to Jesus. Insecurity causes us to hide from Jesus. Just like it did Saul. 1 Samuel 10:22, so the people asked the Lord, where is He? Somebody asking right now, where is she? Where is He? We're trying to promote her, but we can't find her. We're trying to ask questions to gain His wisdom, but we can't find, where is He? And the Lord replied, He is hiding among the baggage. The entire kingdom had come to support Him. Yes, sir. And at that moment, they were calling his name. At that moment, they were rallying behind him. At that moment, they were celebrating him. And he was hiding behind their baggage. See, baggage keeps us hiding. It makes us question our worth. It makes us question our purpose. It makes us question the plan of God to use us. A baggage creates a barrier between us and what God is calling us to. Saul's baggage was his insecurity. And when Saul allowed that insecurity to take control, it took a foothold, and it impacted him for the rest of his life. Saul eventually did become a powerful king, but unfortunately, he was never able to overcome his battle with insecurity. He carried that baggage with him for the rest of his days, and what's more, every mistake, every blunder, every misstep, every miscalculation, even to his untimely death and his marred legacy, all of that can be traced back to the fact that he never figured out how to live beyond his baggage. Fam, I don't know what your baggage looks like. Maybe it's insecurity like it was for Saul, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's fear like it was for Gideon. Or maybe it's bitterness like it was for Jonah. Or maybe it's shame like it was for Peter, or doubt like it was for Thomas. Maybe it was depression and fear like it was for Elijah, or despair and loneliness like it was for Job. Or maybe it was shame and rejection like it was the woman at the well. Or maybe it was greed like it was for the rich young ruler. But whatever your baggage, hear me say, you don't have to live with it. Please hear me. You can live beyond it. You can live beyond it. You don't have to let it push you into hiding. You can let it push you to Jesus. You don't have to let it ruin your marriage. You can give your marriage to Jesus. You don't have to let it get you reprimanded at work. You can give work to Jesus. But here's the reminder. After the lot fell on Saul, the people looked for him and found him hiding among the baggage. They eventually found him. You can hide for a season. You can hide for a season, but after a while, God is going to send somebody to find you. Don't get an attitude with them when they come. Don't fuss at them and tell them to mind their own business. God sent them. You can hide for a season, but God is going to send somebody to find you. So they asked the Lord, "Where is he?" And the Lord replied. The Lord replied, "He over there." The Lord replied, because the Lord is tired of you wasting his time hiding. He said, "He over there." You're not going to be able to hide in insecurity forever. You got too big of an assignment. And it's bigger than your baggage. Your assignment, your calling is bigger than your baggage. They said, "Where is he?" He said, "He's hiding among the baggage." God's going to send somebody, because he's going to send the people that you assigned that he assigned to you to come drag you out of that insecurity. Here's another thing. The reality is God has made you to literally stand out anyway. Verse 22 again, it says, "So they asked the Lord, 'Where is he?' And the Lord replied, 'He's hiding among the baggage.' So they found him and brought him out, and he stood head and shoulders above anyone else. From his mother's womb, God had designed him to stand out." And a lot of times, we become insecure based on the design of God in our lives. He was that kid that was probably embarrassed his whole life because he was too tall. God said, "I placed that in you because at some point you're going to need it to set you apart." He said that he stood head and shoulders above anyone else. God has literally designed you to stick out. Don't get frustrated by it. Don't get your feelings hurt by it. Don't feel othered about it. He's designed you to stick out. Some of y'all have been trying to blend in for too long. trying to blend in all your life and it never works. And the reason is because you're too tall. You're too tall to blend in. Scripture says Saul was too tall to hide successfully. He was literally a head and shoulders above everyone else in the crowd. And you're the same way. You're going to stick out wherever you go. It's going to be obvious that you're different. It's going to be obvious that you're called to be a king. You're going to just keep frustrating yourself if you try to hide. You're going to keep frustrating your life and frustrating the rhythms when you keep trying to hide, because God designed you to be unhideable. It's obvious that there's something on your life. 1 Peter 2:9 says, you're a chosen people. You're chosen. That's why you're here, right? You think this is happen chance? You think you just showed up? You were chosen. You don't even know how many hits there were on your life. You don't even know how many times God messed up with somebody else's agenda and schedule so that you would miss the attack that was planned for you. You don't even know how many times He spared your life. You don't know how many times He's called you out of darkness. You don't know how many times He's covered you and protected you. You thought you were being abandoned by people. God was protecting you from them. That's why you've never fit in. That's why you've always felt different. That's why you always felt like you had to adjust to get on their level. Don't get on their level. God created you to live on a different level. You're chosen. You're royal. You're a holy nation. He's called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. His plan is that you stick out. Just like Saul, He called you to stand out head and shoulders above. He's not leaving anything to chance. He wants you to stick up all the way from your shoulders. Nobody will be confused about who you're supposed to be. You know, when I was a kid, there was a season of my life. I was in middle school. We'll just say that my friends used language I didn't use at home. I can remember a few times I tried to be in with the crowd and say the things. And one of my friends looked at me and said, "You sound stupid when you try to talk like this." He said, just talk like you. You don't sound like us. And I was probably 12 years old, but I remember thinking, I really am different. God designed me to stick out like a sore thumb. And I can spend my whole life trying to put on costumes to make myself look like everybody else. And I can wear the weight of those costumes. And I can put on this mask and that mask. And I can wear that hat. And I can put on this makeup and try to fit into a mold that I was not created for. But where do you think baggage comes from? It's all the extra stuff you put on your life to try to fit into everybody else's mold. When God says, take it all off and live like I've called you to. We might as well learn how to live beyond the baggage. God help us learn how to live beyond our baggage and not be a victim to it. In fact, we want to be brave in spite of our baggage. Let us live brave like Hannah did. Hannah prayed even with tears in her eyes until God made a way out of no way. We want to be brave like Ruth. Ruth could have went back to Moab, but she stayed in Bethlehem before she even knew there was a Boaz. Let me live like Ruth. Let me be brave like Esther. Well, Esther, she was bold. She walked boldly into the king's court, and she didn't know what he was going to do with the scepter. But she said, if I live, I live. If I die, I die. I've raised up for such a time as this. Let me be brave like Esther. Let me be brave like Daniel. Daniel refused to bow down even when he could feel the breath, the hot breath of the lion right there. He refused to bow down. Let me be like Peter. Peter walked on water that people literally drowned in, but he stepped out on it anyway. Let me be brave like Peter. God, help us to live beyond our baggage. The one thing standing in between you and your tomorrow is your baggage. And the thing about it, ain't nobody asking you to carry that. Nobody's asked you to carry that. Nobody's asked you to lug that around in your life. Yes, sir. That's right. Nobody's holding you responsible to carrying your pain. Nobody's asking you to lug around your trauma every day. You can literally lay that down at the feet of Jesus and never pick it up again. And when we do that, we can live beyond the baggage. Stand on your feet with me.